Golub show. All right. So welcome to this training. What can we do about it? Coordinating property management and social services, responses to compulsive hoarding. So just a couple of things to begin with. I just want to thank the network for inviting me to do this training. Last year, I was here with Randy Frost, Dr. Frost, who is the foremost expert on this topic, on compulsive hoarding, along with his colleague Gail Stakigi, and both of them wrote the book Stuff, which is a great read. And obviously that's what we're going to be talking about all day today for the rest of the day, stuff and people that have a lot of it, right? So I wanted to thank the network. Just so people may not realize this, but I used to work at the Supportive Housing Network of New York, and I put on the first 5 of these conferences along with the then executive director, Maureen Fryer, and I'm very happy not to do that anymore because this thing is huge. It's ginormous, and it's nice to be on the other side, and it took a long time, but I got my own workshop finally. So anyhow, let's get into the main topic. Let me just ask a couple of people, raise your hand if you are a hoarder yourself. There's usually a couple in the room. Some of you don't want to admit it, but that's all right. We're not going to out you if you don't want to be. Now raise your hand if you're working with people, like you have 2 or 3 or 4 more clients that you're working with that have hoarding problems. All right, well, you guys are in the right room, I guess. So that's good. Couple of other things, a lot of supportive housing is small, right? Apartment sizes are very tiny. So if you became homeless tomorrow and took a lot of your stuff into a supportive housing apartment, you might be considered a hoarder too. But obviously, you would probably pare down a little bit. It might be hard. But we're not going to talk a lot about space, but it is an actual factor in this problem because many people just have a lot of stuff. They may not necessarily be hoarders, but they live in such tiny apartments that it might look like hoarding. So that's what we're going to get into. This is a little, we do have a whole 5-hour, full day training on working with people with this disorder. So if you're interested in this and hearing more about it, obviously come to the trainings that we offer at CUCS. There's a whole list of other trainings that we offer also at the Institute where I'm a senior trainer there, and I've been training at CUCS for about 10 years now. Jericho Project first brought this issue up to us in 2007, and my supervisor said, do you want to do a little research on this? I said, sure, I'm interested in this. I work with some hoarders at some old supportive housing buildings that I helped open up in Brooklyn. So I said, absolutely, I'm really interested, and you'll see why I'm also kind of fascinated by the topic as well as we go along. So today's going to be a little bit about coordinating property management and social services and also about hoarding. So I try to do a little bit of both today. And of course, for those of you who know, this is a very tough issue to stop. It's very much like an addiction. So you want to treat it as such. People always ask after the training, after they've had why do people do this? Well, we just spent the whole day talking about it. It's an addiction, and that's why people have a hard time stopping. So a lot of the answers are in the stages of change and using harm reduction approach, and most importantly, motivational interviewing. How many people have been trained in motivational interviewing? Oh, a lot of you. So a lot of those things are really, that's using a lot of those techniques is really how you're going to help people deal with their issues. Later on, I'll talk to you about this new evidence-based practice that is going to be rolled out. It's starting to be rolled out in Boston and in California, and I will be doing these trainings. You can sign up for these trainings if you're interested, probably around December. So it's called Buried in Treasure. It's 15 classes long. We'll talk a little bit about this a little bit later. All right, so let's get into this. Obviously, if you don't go into someone's homes, you may not even know they have a problem, right? So you have to go into their homes and see them. The good news about working in supportive housing is that you have the property management and the social services, the on-site services, or people going, if it's scattered site, to their apartments and trying to work things out because you have the property management. So kind of the carrot and stick approach. We'll talk about that today as well. So obviously, just like we were just saying, it's an addictive like behaviors, often difficult to stop, and it's also a lot of people kind of know they have a problem, just like a lot of substance users, right? But they just can't help stopping because it feels good, and it's hard to stop. And it obviously it's very complicated. So instead of calling them siligomaniacs or people that have disposophobia, instead we just want to call them collectors. Why? Right, it's less stigmatizing. They already have internalized a lot of stigma. Their family members, society, and everybody else kind of is disgusted by the behaviors and how they live. So instead of calling them hoarders, it's recommended just to call them collectors. So it's estimated about 2 to 6 million Americans have this problem. It's probably a lot more than that. This is probably a low figure because a lot of people don't want to just come out and say, hey, I'm a hoarder. So again, like other addictive behaviors, people can get better. There seems to be, and I have to say that I'm one of them, it seems like it seems hopeless, right? But it's not. There is help. People do get better. It may not seem that way, though, like working with a lot of substance users. It doesn't seem like they could kick their habits and things like that, but of course we know that many of them do. But of course, it's not easy. And this evidence-based practice will help with that as well. Here, I already mentioned MI is really essential. And it's essential to working in supportive housing, and it's even more essential to working with people with compulsive hoarding problems. So here we have our first picture, right? This is kind of an interesting picture. Everybody sort of points out the bookshelf in the back. Why is the bookshelf organized? I mean, there's one of two reasons, I guess. What's that? Right, you can't get to it. That could be one reason. What might be the other reason? Maybe a more positive reason. What's that? Okay, maybe. Maybe they realize that the books go with the books, but they have a hard time organizing everything else. So a big part of helping people with this issue is helping them figure out categories to put their stuff in, right? And a lot of people have categorization problems, even though it may seem pretty obvious. The forks go with the forks, the spoons go with the spoons, but a lot of them have trouble making decisions about where things should go in their final place. So a lot of people talk about, Dr. Bruberg talks about, a couple years ago he was here, and he talks about here for now. That's sort of the mantra of a lot of people with hoarding problems. I'll just put it here for now because I can't figure out where the best spot is for it. So you're going to help them make a decision and then figure out the category and then find a final resting place for their things. It's a lot of the work, right? So, of course, a lot of compulsive hoarders also use plastic bags. Why? But more stuff inside of them, right? Exactly. The other thing about plastic bags is they're everywhere. I go to the bodega across the street from my home. For the last 10 years, I get an avocado. They want to put it in a plastic bag. I just say, I'll just carry it home. Or I go up and get garbage bags, and I'm buying garbage bags. I don't need another bag for the garbage bags, The other thing about garbage bags, which is really insidious, is there's a garbage heap the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean filled with garbage bags and plastic bottles and things like that. We have to stop using them. And of course, but hoarders like to find them and put more stuff in them. Some hoarders will tell you, I know where everything is in all those plastic bags, while others may not know where any of their stuff is. And of course, when you do a deep cleaning, throw it all away, you're throwing away money, bags of jewelry, and things like that. And of course, you don't want to do that. Okay, obviously, what's this? The old bed bug, right? What color are bed bugs in their natural state? Right, white or clear or translucent. Why are they red like this? Right, whose blood? Our blood, woo! Right, bed bugs, right? They're really impossible to kill. Why are we talking about bed bugs in a hoarding training? Clutter, right? Bed bugs love clutter. Obviously, to declutter is really important. That's the hard part for a lot of hoarders. They can't. But of course, bed bugs, we don't want to stigmatize people with bed bugs. But of course, hoarding does not help the issue at all. So you don't want to doubly stigmatize people if they have bed bugs and have hoarding problems. Obviously, this is a big issue in supportive housing and housing everywhere. It's kind of an epidemic. The reason for it is it's multifaceted, but a lot of it is not using DDTs anymore. And of course, it's also about globalization. But of course, they're here. They're hard to get rid of, and I don't have to tell you that they're a real pain. And nobody wants to get them. They're not going to give you any diseases like mosquitoes, but they're kind of gross to have, and nobody wants them. But you want to educate people about bed bugs and how you can get them, which is for a lot of our tenants, they go to Sal's Army or pick stuff out of the garbage, and of course that's when you bring home bed bugs. You don't want to do that. How do you deal with someone with bed bugs in their apartment if they have hoarding issues? What do you do? Or it's kind of rhetorical, I guess. I'll tell you. You basically want to go in, bring an extra set of clothes if you can, go into the person's apartment, because without going into the apartment, you really can't do the work. And it's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it, right? And if you're going to help people with this disorder, you're going to probably have to go into their apartments. So put on a different set of clothes. When you get out of the apartment, bring in minimal amount of things. Don't bring in your pocketbook or bags or anything. Don't sit down. Just kind of work with them, standing up. When you leave, what are you going to do? You're going to put all your stuff in a plastic bag. Well, you need a plastic bag for that, all right. You have one plastic bag. Put it in a plastic bag or a reusable bag, whatever. Bring it home, and then put it in the washer or dryer, high heat, and that should help a lot. Obviously, I do a lot of traveling, and it's kind of a big fear to when I go to hotels and everything. You can go and look at if hotels have bed bugs. You can find that out. But basically, I always I don't really take things out of my bag, and then I try to launder things right away when I get home. So again, a big part of the training in the full-day training is this. Deep cleanings should be a last resort, right? And here's Randy Frost, who was here last year, who's now a personal friend of mine, thankfully, and who wrote this curriculum, and he's the expert. He says a number of people have asked about the effects of just going into someone's home and cleaning it out without their knowledge. While this may solve a short-term problem, it will not get rid of the hoarding behavior. Before a change of behavior can occur, the person must learn to make the discarding decisions by themselves or on their own or with our help, at least in supportive housing with their case manager. I would not advise such a strategy unless the person's health or safety was imminently threatened. Now, that's very hard to figure out what that really means, but obviously if the person's in serious danger right away or they're going to be evicted right away, that may be an imminent threat, and that may result in the one reason to do a deep cleaning. But it should be a last resort, not the first resort. Why? Well, this is why. Most of us who are working in supportive housing do not want our clients and our tenants to become suicidal, but after deep cleanings, it is often the case that it's traumatizing and people do decompensate. So we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. I think we'd all agree. So suicidal ideation and serious attempts have been recorded after deep cleanings. Hospitalizations, not uncommon. A lot of people go to the hospital, then it severs the relationship, and you got to start all over again from scratch. And then, more importantly, what happens is they come back, or you do a deep cleaning, and then a month later, what's happened? Same thing, or worse. It gets worse. So it's best to avoid these kind of deep cleanings or forced cleanouts whenever possible. If you're going to do it, you should decide as a team that it's necessary, both on property management and social service side, if it's congregate housing, and then come to a decision. And then if you're going to do a deep cleaning, label everything that you're going to save and that shouldn't be thrown away, so nothing, you're not throwing away bags of money or heirlooms or jewelry or things like that. That's the right way to do it if you have to. So just a few words on just property management and social services coordination. A lot of people kind of know this, but in supportive housing and permanent lease-based housing, tenants have rights, right? And the lease is really the leverage. We hear a lot about we don't have a lot of leverage with our tenants. Well, the lease is your leverage, right? Obviously, non-payment of rent, leads to court. We don't want to evict people. When we take them to court, we want to get the money so that our buildings can keep going, right? But of course, it's teaching people about tenancy and how to become a tenant, what that means to be a tenant, and the obligations of tenancy. What are the obligations of tenancy? What's that? First one is pay your rent. What's the next one? What's that? Right, don't disturb your neighbor. That's right, don't disturb your neighbors. Let them enjoy peaceful housing as well, right? And obviously don't turn your supportive housing into a meth lab, right? It's not really written that way, but obviously don't damage the apartment, don't damage the building, don't set it on fire due to your hoarding so that, your building, your apartment burns to a crisp and the rest of the building does, right? So that's the obligations of tenancy. And people need to know that. That should start right away once they become a tenant. The main thing is learning how to pay rent, which is really key. So we talk a lot about this in this training. It's different roles, similar goals. Obviously, sometimes there's differences of opinion on how to do this. And it's really about property management and social services working together as a functional unit. It's not easy, but it works. And we have 30 years of doing this and working out all the kinks, so we know that this does work. A big part on the social service side is getting people to understand what it means to be a tenant and helping them also pay rent. That may mean, opening up a bank account, helping them write a money order, helping them understand what it means, again, to meet the obligations of tenancy. For a lot of chronically homeless people, they're not used to being housed, and a lot of other folks have never, had a bank account and things like that. So property management, social services working together. The main thing about it, though, is that there's a lot of overlap, and here are the obligations of tenancy under the Fair Housing Law. And of course, property management and social services need to work together in order to keep people housed in safe, clean, and supportive environments. That's what really today has been all about. And here are the obligations of tenancy again. That is a big part of the lease, because a big part of the lease is maintaining the conditions of your apartment so that it's free of vermin and bed bugs, and you can get in case there's a fire or something, you can get out. So all that stuff is really important. It should start right away, and the expectations of what it means to be a tenant, and also passing inspection if it's a Section 8 apartment and things like that, because you don't want to lose a subsidy. Otherwise, the rent goes up and you can't live there anymore. So the most important thing around this idea of working together as a team is, as I mentioned earlier, carrot and stick approach. And a lot of people have gotten really good at doing this, and it works, right? You don't want to, again, evict people, but sometimes taking people to court gets you to get them to go to services or start engaging in therapy or getting to pay their rent on time. The main thing, though, in the background is that tension is inherent in using this model, in doing supportive housing. And that should not be a surprise to anybody. Tension is going to happen because obviously the different roles and different functions. But the good news is if you can resolve a lot of the tensions, it should make everything work a lot better. So out of the push and pull, hopefully creative solutions come. That means you have to meet and talk about things and understand each people's departments and also maybe just understand what the other departments are going through. Everybody thinks, oh, that job's easier than this job. And of course, both property management and doing supportive housing, social services, are both jobs, both roles are very tough. But of course, you want to kind of meet and work out these things, especially on hoarding issues, because property management may say, all right, this person has to go, and we got to take them to court for a holdover or an eviction. Whereas social services might say, well, let's work with this person for a few more months and see what we can do. Thing about hoarding is you want to start now, because it's going to take a couple of months to really start to, maybe see some progress, maybe a year or two. The curriculum is 15 weeks long, so that's a few months. So you want to give yourself some time. You don't want to just say, oh, this person's, getting evicted right now, let's try to see what we can do in a week. You can't do anything in a week. It's going to take a bit of time, and for some, it may take a year or two to really start to open up about these issues and really try to do some of the work. So any thoughts about tension and conflict in supportive housing? Everybody has it. It's normal. And I think once you hear that, I think a lot of people, it's kind of breathe a sigh of relief that, okay, we all dealing with tension. CUCS, for those of you who don't know, has a long-term partnership with Common Ground. And of course, it's like being in a marriage. Things happen, sometimes you argue, and hopefully you sit down and you work things out. And of course, it does work very well, at least for CUCS and Common Ground. So let's talk a little bit about compulsive hoarding and the nature of the disorder. Now, we all collect things for these three reasons, okay? So if you're a collector, or if you're a hoarder, or you just have things and you have stuff that you're saving, we all collect things for the same reasons. One thing could be, just it has sentimental value, so you collect it, heirlooms, pictures of your grandparents or your mom, or something that's been handed down, you save it, right? Then there are these items that have utility, right? I don't know about you, but at my house I have like 5 different ways to press garlic, but I only use one way. I use a knife, you know. But you never know when someone's going to come over and they want to use the crusher or the roller or this and that, so you don't throw it away. It's got some utility, so you never know, right? I usually tell a story about this pair of pants these green pants. They were really loud and obnoxious, and I would try them on and they would never fit. I don't know what happened to them. I think they shrunk in the wash. It probably wasn't me gaining weight or anything like that. So I thought maybe I'll hold on to them and put the mesh stuff that pregnant women wear, you know, but then I said, you know, this is crazy. I got to throw these away, you know. There are probably people out there that hold on to some clothing because you never know. They might fit in it in a year or two, right? People can relate, right? So they say if, you know, you don't wear it in 6 months or a year, you know, get rid of it. Or for a lot of hoarders, the better thing to do instead of like saying you're going to get rid of it is to do what? Right, donate it. Sometimes if it has utility or someone else is going to use it, that really helps, that satisfies, you know, the reason why they're holding on to it. Then there are the things that we just think are pretty and we like them and they're pretty, so you save them. So those 3 reasons, you know, is why all of us hold on to things. No different. So in that way, collectors and hoarders are basically identical. Now, for the collector, and here I am. This guy looks exactly like me, right? I got the suit on. All right, well, maybe not. But for the collector, like me, you'll see in a minute, I'm a collector. It usually brings us joy. We like to show off our collections. We save money to buy more of the things we like. Gives us a sense of pride. But most importantly, it doesn't impair our daily functioning, whereas hoarding generally does, and we'll see that. So here is the things that I collect. Books. I'm a big bibliophile. I like to read about philosophy and history and music and Greco-Roman times. And I brought the book that I'm reading right now, which is, lo and behold, about the Roman Empire. So I'm always reading, and I'm always collecting hardcover books. That's my pet peeve. I like to get hardcover books. So I have about 3,000 books at home. And yes, I've read most of them. So anyhow, and of course, I like to show them off. This is just me saying, when people walk into my home, hey, look how smart I am, right? Look at all these books. It's vain. It's vain. It's a vanity project. I get it. But, you know, it's my thing. Does this cause any dysfunction? No. Well, some people, if you ask my wife, she'd say you're a hoarder. But this is not hoarding. At least, if these books were falling on top of my kids and on top of me, and they were filled my bathtub and all over my kitchen, I mean, it's about to be like that, but not yet. Then it would be. Or if I'd spent all my money on books, then that could be a problem, and I was bankrupt, and it looked neat, though, that might be hoarding, right? Or something like a shopaholic, right? So sometimes when it's really neat, that's kind of more of an OCD kind of thing, OCD-based hoarding, which is slightly different. We'll get into that in a second. Anyhow, there's my lovely bookshelf. I just like looking at it. You know, we can just talk about my books all day long. All right, so in contrast, for hoarders, usually, but not always, sometimes they're ashamed of their stuff, sometimes embarrassed by their possessions, but it oftentimes causes emotional distress, usually depression or anxiety. And the most importantly, though, if you're trying to figure out, is this person a hoarder or is it not, you want to ask, how does it impair their daily functioning? Now, if it's neat and it doesn't, then you're like me, maybe you're a collector. But how does it impair their daily functioning? Obviously, what are the big things? They're right here on the side. It's a health hazard, right? A fire hazard. People maybe fall and can't get up, and then they need the clapper. But you could fall, and so it could it could be unsafe, right? Obviously, if you're going to be evicted due to hoarding, that's pretty unfunctional, dysfunctional kind of behavior. So that's how you would tell, right? And those are the main questions you want to ask. But the other thing is sometimes it's hard to tease out whether it's poor ADLs or whether it's hoarding, right? Now, a lot of our folks with serious mental health issues, maybe people living with schizophrenia may have some ADL problems. If they can get rid of their stuff and they can learn new skills, it's probably more of a function of ADLs. It's a fine line, though. Today's person with poor ADLs could turn into tomorrow's, compulsive hoarder. But the main question to ask is, how does it impair their daily functioning? And that really gets to the heart of the matter. Now, the other thing about compulsive hoarders is many of them, and you wouldn't tell, you can't really see hoarding unless you go into someone's apartment. Many of them are very functional and very intelligent. Many of them are very smart and also see themselves as very creative. One of the things that Randy Frost talks about is how they're really, one thing that's fascinating about them is that they're really in tune to textures and colors and like an artist would be. And that's kind of something that we can kind of learn from about them, and it's interesting in that way. Many of them also have been reported to be raised by cold and overtly critical parents or cold parents. So, of course, one thing you don't want to do when you're working with these people is what? Right, be overly critical. Now, of course, that's where motivational interviewing comes in. Obviously, MI is just the opposite of that. It's about being compassionate and using empathy and listening to somebody. So you don't want to avoid that big time. The other thing, it may seem ironic, is that many of them have rigid ideas of perfectionism. Usually, it doesn't look like that when you see their apartments. But of course, they say, I want to find the perfect spot for this. I don't know how to achieve perfection, so I'll just leave it here for now. And then we'll figure it out later, and of course, later never comes, right? They also fear of waste, where you could see how going green can kind of feed into the hoarding. You don't want to waste things. They also fear of losing an opportunity. So you're walking along, you see a piece of driftwood, right? Most of us would just kind of go, all right, it's a piece of driftwood, I'm just walking away from this. It's garbage, right? For them, they see it, they look down, they go, aha, I could do something with this. Take it home, and of course, oftentimes it never gets done, right? So they don't want to waste an opportunity, right? They go buy all these records or get all these records just to have them, but they don't listen to them, right? If you collect records and you listen to them, you're probably more of a collector. So there's a lot of guilt and shame and ambivalent feelings there again. You hear motivational interviewing, which is all about resolving people's ambivalence. And they also have ambivalent feelings about their self-worth and a lot of self-doubt. So that's a lot of what is going through a lot of folks. So here, another room you walk into. We've already seen this. So again, this is a pretty extreme version of hoarding. Anybody have somebody's apartments that are like this? Okay, because this is troubling. And of course, here's my desk at my office with all my hoarding research. No, I'm kidding. It doesn't look like this. It's not totally neat, but it's not like this. Another feature of hoarding is called churning, and that is, if you tell your tenants, you got an apartment inspection coming up, and you need to pass it, go up and clean up your room, and I'll come and check it out at the end of the day. You go up there. Or they come downstairs after 7 hours of huffing and puffing. You go upstairs and it looks worse. That's called churning because they're just moving one pile to the next and nothing really ever gets organized. That's kind of what happens at my house on Sundays. We clean it up, and then the kids have a play date, and then it's just back to this again. But churning is a big feature of hoarding. Obviously, a lot of folks. One of the number one things that people hoard or collect are newspapers. What's the problem with that? Right, a fire hazard, right? So you want to have clear expectations from property management and stuff that's in the lease about how high your piles can be and how much stuff can you have in your apartment, and do you need to have an egress to get out of your apartment in case of a fire, and all these kind of things. So, of course, if you ask somebody who has a lot of newspapers, what are they going to likely tell you? Why do they have all these things? Right, because? Right, there's an article in this paper and in that paper. I'm going to read. I'm going to get to it. So sometimes you can maybe cut some of them out, but you could see that would take you a long time. The other thing you could do is maybe say, look on the internet or the inner tubes, right? Because all this stuff is online. Well, for a lot of people with this problem, that doesn't really fly because it's not the thing itself. Now, for me, people always tell me, why don't you have a schnook? I'm like, well, I don't like schnooks, or a nook, I mean. Sorry, a nook. Right, because I need the thing itself. I need the book. I need the actual thing. So a lot of hoarders need the thing itself. So, and of course, the other problem is a lot of our folks don't have access to computers. But there's some things that computers can be helpful with. One thing is finding other folks online that have this problem. It could be a good way into getting into treatment. Is just like peer support or peer specialists, finding other people that have hoarding problems and talking to them sort of anonymously. And there's hundreds of these websites. There's Messy's Anonymous, there's Hoarders Anonymous. There's tons of websites where people can kind of chat with other people like them. So that's an idea of using technology. Here's a person that has the issue talking about their own problems. I feel that if I finally get rid of my piles that fill the rooms in my house and garage, I will die. I know it's not true, but I feel that way. It's my safety pile and significant other. If I throw too much away, there'll be nothing left of me, right? So their stuff, it's the exaggerated connection to their stuff that's really what hoarding is about. And of course, it's almost like chopping off an arm. It's like it's a part of their body, right? So that's really what hoarding is at its heart, right? So all their stuff all their memories is wrapped up in their stuff, and a lot of them don't trust their memories, so they need this stuff to sort of remind them about who they are, right? Because if you take away all your memories, who would you be? Nobody, really, right? You got to watch the movie Memento. Check that movie out. Actually, Citizen Kane was on recently, and Citizen Kane was based on William Randolph Hearst, who was also a hoarder. So if you haven't seen Citizen Kane, you have to. But it's also, you can watch it for the hoarding as well. So here, people probably know this. We talked about this last year with Randy, that in the new DSM-5, hoarding now is its own disorder. It used to be that hoarding was a subset of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. That is no longer the case. After 10 years of research, we know it's its own thing. And now having OCD is really a subset of hoarding in some ways, or it's its own thing, but about 20% of people have hoarding problems have OCD issues as well. So it's not all of them, but it's a good substantial number of people. But the other 80% do not have OCD. They just have hoarding. So a big thing, so here's the definition, persistent difficulty discarding and parting with possessions regardless of their actual value. It's hard to get rid of this stuff. It causes major distress, usually depression if they're trying to get rid of things. And of course, we just talked a little bit about number C, active living areas can't be used for which they were designed. So if your kitchen can't be used as a kitchen and your bathroom is just a closet and your bedroom is a closet, everything is a closet, that is really what hoarding is all about. Obviously, it does usually cause significant distress or impairment in work. People also hoard in their cars and at home and at work. And relationships, many hoarders are actually single. Go figure. Or have high divorce rates. Shouldn't be a shocker there. And of course, the other thing is that hoarding shouldn't, if let's say someone's hoarding due to TBI or Prader-Willi syndrome, which is a different kind of organic brain disorder, it will be ruled out. So the other thing is sometimes if you have schizophrenia, people hoard due to delusions, and that may be ruled out, but it's not really clear. Many people, at least over the years I've done this, does seem that people living with schizophrenia do have a higher propensity to have also hoarding problems, but it could also be because of disorganized thinking and disorganized features and things like that, that is another reason why they may be more prone to it. Incidentally, there's not a lot of research on that topic. There's also not a lot of research connecting hoarding with homelessness, although we know there's something to be said about that. There's only been, to my knowledge, only one paper, I think, in Australia written about that. So that's ripe to do more studies. So other features are these random piles, fear of putting things out of sight. Now, people always often ask me, why don't you put your books in a closet? I'm like, are you kidding me? I would never do that because I want to see them. A lot of hoarders also don't like putting things out of sight because they don't trust their memories. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and they forget. So they need to have it out in the open so that they can kind of still remember it. So one thing you want to do is either use open shelving or clear bins or both. Again, another feature is this indecisiveness, and they don't know how to make a decision. I'll save my taxes for the next 50 years. Well, you don't need to, right? You only need to save how many years of taxes? 7, 8, 20, right? I'd say about 7 or 8, right? But a lot of people, can't make a decision, and they're just going to keep it, right? Or they'll keep a bag of pay stubs or a bag of all their receipts. Some of that stuff you don't need to hold on. Some things you do need to hold on. So helping them figure out, if you just bought something, you want to hold on to the receipt and hold on to, the warranty or whatever. But, you just bought a pack of gum. You don't need the giant long receipt. You don't need the receipt. Don't need it, right? So helping them make a decision. How do you help people decide? How do you help people make decisions? What's that? Taken right out of MI. You help them what? Weigh the pros and cons, right? So that's a big feature too. What are the pros of holding on to this? What are the cons of holding on to it? I already talked a little about churning and what that is. Here, there are 4 different types of hoarding. Now, some of the pictures we just saw are actually common hoarding, even though it's kind of uncommon. Then there's animal hoarding, which I like to explain as sort of Dr. Dolittle syndrome. So those are the people that talk to the animals, and the animals talk back to them, and it's a little weird. And of course, they're trying to save all the animals, but eventually they get too many animals, and they can't save them all, and then many of them, they can't care for them, so many of them start to die, and you've probably seen the shows, and it's kind of, it gets a little disgusting. Incidentally, one year I met someone from the Department of Health who was on the Animal Planet, and we met each other. It was like, oh my God, you're doing hoarding stuff, and I'm doing hoarding stuff. Let's go out for lunch. And it was downtown. This was when we were on Wall Street. We went out for lunch, and a few minutes later, we started talking about hoarding and everything. We turned around, and there's like, just everybody had just left. And we were like, what happened? It was like, I think we just grossed everybody out. But so the animal hoarding is kind of, it's not a huge problem in supportive housing because a lot of people have strict rules around having pets and things like that. However, we got to be careful with pets because they're therapeutic, and if people say, I need an animal or a pet, it's a violation of ADA, so you can have one animal. So hopefully we won't see a lot of that. But someone was telling me that somebody in their supportive housing, their tenant was feeding squirrels, and the squirrels are sort of living in their apartment. Yeah. That seems troubling because I have squirrelophobia, if there is such a thing. And they bark. They're weird. They're like, it's like, I feel like they're going to bite all my toes off. But anyhow, so that's animal hoarding, and obviously you're going to treat that. A lot of people have, a lot of the hoarding it gets very complicated because it's not just hoarding. They have medical problems. They have mental health issues. So it can get very complicated. And obviously, when you have the animals in the apartment and everything, it could complicate things even more. Diogenes syndrome is kind of fascinating to talk about because, and a lot of people, this is kind of like living in squalor. So this is the really troubling kind of behavior where people are, maybe collecting excrement and having they're urinating in jars, and they have jars full of urine and everything. It's very jarring. But anyhow, so it's a really big problem. And so Diogenes, just so you know, was a famous cynic in ancient Greece. He lived in a wheelbarrow, and the reason why they call it, Diogenes didn't have hoarding problems, but because he flaunted social mores, I think they called, because the problem is so extreme, they named it after him. He also, he didn't care about social mores, so he went around Athens naked, and he also masturbated in public, which is just really a no-no. Just shouldn't do that ever. So they named it after him. But obviously, this is a big problem with the elderly, and it's obviously can be very troubling and, of course, hard to work with. So that's Diogenes syndrome. OCD-based hoarding. See, all 3 of these types of hoarding, people like substance abuse, they get a high when they go out and collect things and bring it back home. It feels good. It's euphoric. Well, with OCD-based hoarding, they just can't help it. They don't like to do it, but they can't help it. So it doesn't make them feel good. It's the OCD that has them collecting things. So it's very different, even though it may look the same. Sometimes, you'll have all the jars lined up in someone's cabinets or something like that, and they have OCD. So OCD can go from, mild to extremely debilitating. One of our trainers has OCD and freely admits it, but it helps us do curricula because he, crosses the I's, dots the T's and everything. And but of course, it can be very debilitating. So here are some other demographic features. Usually, they say hoarding begins around the age 13 and becomes a big problem around 50. It's uncanny when I ask people how old the person is. They're like 49, 51. Obviously, why does it happen at that age? You just get more stuff. In college, I had 10 books, and then now I have 3,000 books. So you just get more stuff. Now, incidentally, there's little evidence that there's any connection between being materially deprived and have hoarding problems. So people that have gone through the Holocaust or have lived through the Depression. There's no correlation between those people and hoarding, although there does seem to be some correlation between being homeless and hoarding. There's probably some correlation, but there is no causation right now. We don't know enough. Obviously, the other thing now with hoarding is that we realize that there's some genetics component to this, so it probably runs in the family. And probably in the next 10 years, I'm pretty sure Pfizer's on this right now, to come and detect the gene so that they can kind of come up with some medications to manage this behavior. There already are some SRIs that do this. So there's going to be a lot more research done on medication end of things, to be sure. Obviously, we mentioned about marital status. Of course, hoarding, like all mental health issues, worsens with other losses, other traumas. Now, insight ranges low, but that's not necessarily true. A lot of people understand that they have a problem. They just, again, can't help it. We used to talk about substance users that, they don't know, they're in denial, right? And denial isn't just a river in Egypt, but that's not really true, right? A lot of times people understand they have a problem, they just can't stop it because it's an addiction, right? And of course, it's all the things when you stop using drugs, you lose your friends and you lose the ritual of it all and all that. So I'd say insight is pretty wide-ranging, but a lot of people do know they have a problem, they just can't help and they can't stop it. So a lot of things that are here, you're going to see the problem, but you're also going to see the solution right here in the problem. So the difficulty staying on task and paying attention, a lot of hoarders have ADD or ADHD. So how are you going to help them stay on task? What are you going to have to do? Thoughts from the audience? How do you get people to stay on task? What's that? Okay, help them giving positive reinforcement. Okay, right, making the task small and narrow and doable, right? So instead of saying go upstairs and clean your apartment, instead say go upstairs and let's work on your bathroom, or let's work on the kitchen sink, or let's work on the refrigerator, right? Where do you start? What's that? That's right, you start where they want to start. If they like cooking, start to help them, get their stove clean. Right? So start where they want to start. That's going to help them, give them the most satisfaction, the most joy, and make them feel good so they can go and do the other areas, right? We already talked about categorization issues. So a lot of who's going to create the categories? Right, you want to help them create they should come up with the categories, hopefully on their own if they need a little help them create some of the categories. But you want the answers to come from them, again, with MI, so that they're learning the skill to start to figure out where everything kind of goes. Obviously, we talked about how to help them make decisions, weigh the pros and cons, sort of talk to them, listen to them about what they think about their stuff, the emotion that it brings, whether they need it or not. Do you have 5 other things like it? If you do, maybe we can get rid of 1, right? So again, you want to start slow. If you have 5 TV sets in your apartment, and everybody has a tenant like that, right, who collects electronics and everything, right? So instead, when I usually ask, I have 5 TV sets up on the board, people often say, well, get rid of all 4. Well, that's too fast. Get rid of 1, right? That's the stuff reduction program, right? Start slow. This is a very slow process. You want to give yourself a lot of time and give the person time to start to, learn the skills, start to feel, the sensation of getting rid of things, and it's going to hurt in the beginning and cause a lot of distress, but over time, they'll get used to it and they'll realize that, it's not that hard to do. What's that called? All right, harm reduction, habituation, right? Used in exposure therapy. You're exposing them to this kind of painful feeling and telling them after you sort of process it, it's not as bad as you once thought, right? Again, we already talked about how people don't trust their memory, so you might want to talk to them about, having this book here. You don't need the book because you already have the idea already in your head. You can remember these things even without the stuff, okay? Obviously, motivational things is going to entail, working on the issues around motivation. Connecting up with personal goals is really key here. What do you want to achieve? And how does the clutter and the hoarding get in the way of you achieving your goals, otherwise known as, creating cognitive dissonance or building discrepancy in Miller and Rolnick's sort of definitions. Obviously, avoidant behavior, the biggest thing they're trying to avoid is decluttering, right? Or stopping bringing things in. So a lot of this stuff is trying to work out why they bring it in, what does it mean to them, how do they feel about it. So here's the main things that people like to hoard: newspapers, paper, containers, clothing, food, and trash. You see that? What? Oh, let's move on. All right, forget about the books. I don't want to talk about that. All right, so obviously, again, with property management and hoarding, going back to this idea of working together as a team, right? It's property management, having clear roles for each department. These are just sort of basic things. Clear expectations for each department and for your tenants, again, around what their apartment can look like and should not look like, right? Again, they call those, people don't maybe know, but they call them goat paths. If there's just only little ways to get through an apartment, because only a goat can get through them. Obviously, air disagreements. A lot of times, sometimes it's about cross-training. A lot of meetings where, you're talking about these issues. So you may, if you have a lot of problems with hoarding and clutter, you may have a little task force, between the two departments that are kind of, meeting to deal with this issue. It's probably better to deal with hoarding as a team approach as opposed to case one-on-one like a lot of case management is, because people can burn out really quickly. It takes a lot of energy, and it can really tap your resources. So it's better to maybe have a team so you can all go in together, or one person, works that way and with the person that day and keeps going, because you can see it does take a lot of time and energy. Obviously, you want to foster ways to collaborate. And here is the idea of developing a team to deal with both bed bugs and hoarding, because they're really pretty much connected. So all your tenants should know about pest control and requirements, how to upkeep their apartments, how to fill out work orders. So some people do need to know, like, what's the process, and the process should be transparent. It should be really clear. If you fill out this work order, you're going to get something happening in the next 24 hours or 48 hours, obviously given the realities of parts and things like that. Obviously, the importance of passing apartment inspections and the consequences of failing apartment inspections if you have Section 8 on-site, subsidies. Timelines for repairs, extermination, pest control, and of course, we don't get into it, but finding a really good pest control company is really key, dealing with bed bugs as well as hoarding. Obviously, problems that a lot of property managers have to deal with, and this is, tell me something I don't know, right? Obviously, it's the odors from their neighbors that causes, they probably do a lot of complaining about, and the critters and the vermin and the bed bugs crawling into their apartment, even if they don't have the problem, but they're living next door to somebody with these issues. Obviously, that can become a really big headache for everybody. And of course, for the tenants that have to live next door to people like this, it can be very troubling. So of course, for property management, they have to deal with that and look at the larger community. Obviously, with bed bugs and hoarding, can incur a big cost to deal with bed bugs, and obviously decluttering and maybe bringing in other companies and other resources could be costly. Obviously, people, bed bugs, getting rid of them is very, very expensive. So everything should be moving towards more prevention, like everything is in healthcare. So managing, obviously, staff, has a lot of issues going into apartments. People get the heebie-jeebies, get skeeved out, get freaked out. And of course, you want to hear what they have to say, because this is not easy. It's a dirty job, but somebody has to do it. And a lot of those people are in the room right now. So the other thing is that property managers should know about building codes around fire, health, and safety issues. Now, in New York City, there are now new rules from the city council, like if you get rid of a mattress, you have to encase it in plastic so that people don't spread bed bugs and things like that. There are also city ordinances that you should know about and use. Now, how many people here are from outside of New York City? Okay. I don't know what the rules are and some of the city laws in your municipalities, but I will say this, because I know this is a statewide conference, so we don't want to just talk about New York City. But for those places outside of the city, New York City, that is, there is precedent to creating these sort of hoarding task forces all across the country. So if you don't have one, you want to take a look at, the the costs of dealing with hoarding in neighborhoods and different government departments, because they're probably spending a lot of money and resources and there's probably that's where you want to get everybody together and sort of figure out what kinds of things you can do as a city to deal with the hoarding problems. And again, there's a lot of precedent for these task forces. There was one many years ago in the city. There's some in California. So if you want more information about that, you can see me after class. So obviously, you can offer housekeeping assistance with cleaning products and things like that. Sometimes, doing a one-shot makeover, right? If it looks nice, people may have may want to keep it looking nicer. Also, you need to paint apartments every 3 years or so, right? So sometimes to paint an apartment, you have to move things out, right? Kind of like you're moving. And so that may be an opportunity to start to declutter once people have to move their stuff out. You can use that as a sort of reason to get in there because we have to paint. In New York City, though, New York City codes and laws are saying that the onus is on the landlord to ensure the occupants' health and safety and that people's apartments are free of vermin and bed bugs and things like that. So that can also be a reason to go into someone's apartment and say, hey, this is our responsibility. We need to do this. And I'm not saying, you can key into people's apartments, but if people don't let you in, there is precedent and there are rules here and codes from the city that says we need to get in there and deal with this issue whether you like it or not. So you want to be familiar with that. The other thing about a lot of the rules and laws, they change often, so you want to be familiar and pay attention to them. Obviously, violations, if not remedied, are grounds for eviction. And of course, I won't belabor this, but you can take a look at some of the building codes here. People who are on the property how many property managers are there in the room here? Okay. And the rest of you are on the social service side, I imagine? Social service department? Okay, so for property managers, are you familiar with these codes? For some of you, it may be new, but if it is, this should be good news because frequency of collection of waste matters from dwelling units, insects, rodents. That's all the onus is all on the landlord. So that's a reason to go in and declutter and try to create more sanitary conditions. So here's the website for the building codes. And of course, I just mentioned, don't assume the building codes are the same. Things change often. Sometimes a lot of property managers do these things already, but they give warning signs or verbal warning letters. And the first letter is really nice. The second letter, not so nice. The third letter is kind of, all right, we need to do this, or else, right? So you want to have kind of these letters at the ready to send them out. Those letters, of course, should give the tenant, they should say, oh, I got the letter. I'm going to come down. I need some help so I can keep my apartment. It's pretty universal that most of our tenants want to stay housed in their apartments and not move. And the other thing is that some of our tenants have been evicted already due to hoarding, and we may not even know that. And the whole point is not to evict anybody due to hoarding problems. We want to keep them housed and help them manage their hoarding and, of course, ultimately, get better. Or a little bit about social service practices. So that was property management. Now moving into social services. In general, it's going to take a lot of time. What time is it? What have I got till? Okay, got to move fast. All right. Dealing with hoarding is going to take a lot of time, effort, and patience, persistence, and a lot of coordination. We talked a little bit about that already. The most important person that has to be involved, that oftentimes is left out of the equation, is the tenant themselves. They need to be involved in this process if possible, and I would say hopefully more often than not. In some cases that may not be possible. But you need to get that person involved and, of course, ultimately get them to be able to do these things on their own or with some assistance, get them the skills. So you should also anticipate a lot of resistance from a tenant to to throw away their stuff or to get rid of it or declutter. And, of course, like with MI, you want to roll with resistance and sort of hopefully work on their time as much as possible. Obviously, again, it's the mantra of the day. Deep cleanings should be a last resort, not the first resort. All right, so you want to use some stages of change in order to work with somebody. A lot of, again, keep getting people to start to, in the beginning, you just want to talk to them and build trust. Don't even mention the hoarding. Don't even talk about it. Just work on their goals, concrete things that you can get them, build trust up, and then move them into contemplation by talking to them about, what do you like about this thing? What do you like about that thing? Why do you collect this thing, right? Just talk to them about what they like about it. Then you want to talk to them, eventually, what don't you like about it, right? Here are the pros about having all this stuff. What are the cons now? Are there any cons? Obviously, ultimately, if the list of cons starts to get bigger and bigger as you start talking to them and addressing their goals and sort of building discrepancy with their goals, and the hoarding is getting in the way of having relationships or having a girlfriend or going back to work or whatever, then you hopefully will build, discrepancy and cognitive dissonance, moving them into contemplation. Then in the contemplation phase, you want to just keep on talking to them about their goals. Again, keep on weighing the pros and cons, and then help them prepare to start decluttering. And like you're preparing somebody with substance abuse problems, they're not ready to maybe go to detox or start to cut down or stop. How do you prepare people? Well, first you need support. Let's build your support network up. Let's link you up to family, friends, other providers, other support groups, friends, maybe a support group, and then help them start to do some of the techniques which are usually all cognitive behavioral therapy based, and that's when they move into action. You do some of that stuff in preparation. So I already talked about the stuff reduction program. It's slow. Instead of getting rid of all 4 and save 1, get rid of 1 at a time, see how it goes, talk to them about it, process it, and then say, are you ready? Maybe we can get rid of another one. Again, which ones do you get rid of? Right, you keep the one they want and get rid of the one, help them, let them make the decision, right? And again, here you weigh the pros and cons, right? So what do they like about it? It makes me feel good, makes the pain go away. It's comforting having all the stuff surrounding me. What are the negative things? Well, I feel guilty the next day. It's very expensive. It's unhealthy, unsafe. I may get evicted. Those are some negative things. What are the pros if you stop? Well, I have more room, more time to do things, save money, keep my housing, make more friends, have people come over for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Randy Frost, incidentally, thinks that that's universal. People always want people to come over on the holidays. Hopefully that's true more often than not. Obviously, some of the cons of stopping, which is usually the box that we often forget, it's going to be hard, right? You have to change everything, routines. People are not sure they can do it. Obviously, all the pain that hoarding maybe have put off, or they did these other collected, which is sort of got rid of the pain, that all comes flooding back. So you have to obviously figure out what you're going to do with their routines, create routines and the feelings, and process all that. Obviously, this is also from MI, right? These scales that you use, on a scale from 0 to 10, do you have a pair of shoes that you want? People have a pair of shoes that you want? You're thinking about a pair of shoes? I'm sure some of you have some shoes in mind, right? On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you want the pair of shoes? It's a 10. I hear a 10, right? Right? How much do you need these new pair of shoes? Well, if it's a 10, you may have problems, right? If they say, well, I don't need them, it's a 1. Well, a lot of hoarders conflate the two, right? What I want is exactly what I need, but of course it's not true. If you have 100 pairs of shoes already, you may want another pair of shoes, but you don't need them, right? So kind of creating these ideas about want versus need is important, and getting them to differentiate. Another thing that you can do, these are more CBT kinds of things, is ask the individual to pick something that maybe, you can do it as a thought experiment, you can do it as a simulation, or you can do it for real, right? So you pick something that they may not care about, although a lot of hoarders, a picture of their grandmother is the same thing as a pen they just picked up off the ground, right? So you want to say, well, I'll hold on to this thing. It's not like we're throwing it away, but I'll save it in my desk. You can get it back after a month. Let's see how you feel about this. So, you take it away, and then you rate their distress levels. A minute later, they're apoplectic. They're like, give me that thing back. 5 minutes later, they're still going crazy. 10 minutes later, maybe a little bit less so, but a day later, calming down, A week later, oftentimes they've forgotten that they've even given it to you. 2 weeks later, same thing. Again, this is about habituation, exposure therapy. It's teaching them that, you know what, it's not as as horrible as you thought. You know, you can do this. It's not that bad. And of course, as they do it more and more, they get the skills to be able to do it, and it becomes easier and easier. Then there are these gradual exposure, non-acquiring trips. Just like, you know, Pavlovian conditioning, you know, you're going to take them on these trips and have them not bring things home, right? So let's say they go to Sal's Army, right, and they like to shop there because it's cheap and affordable and everything. So you go there, and, you know, let's say Sal's Army is on this side of the road, right? So you're going to go on this side of the road and not get too close, go home without anything in your hand and leave. Then the next trip is going on this side of the road near Sal's Army. You may get kind of close. Don't buy anything, don't get anything, and leave. Then eventually, what are you going to do? Go in Sal's Army, that's right. Not touch anything and then leave. The next trip, you may go in and browse and put your hands on things and then try to leave, right? Again, exposing them to, you know, the ability to not bring home. And then, of course, the same thing you do with trying to discard things, right? So it's a double movement, trying to stop bringing things in and also trying to help them discard things, right? So you can kind of do that as a thought experiment or do it, you know, as a simulation. And then, of course, you want to try to do it out in the real world. And there's this non-acquiring help card that you can use. Now, the thing about this is this card is way too big. You can't cut this out and put it in your wallet. So you got to make a smaller version of it. All right, forget it. You know, it's too late in the day for you guys. All right, so if you take out this card, you can say, I plan to use this within the next month. No. I have enough money right now to pay for it? No, you don't. I have to place this. I have the place to put this so it doesn't add to my clutter? No, I don't. I'm sure I truly want this and will not return it. No, I acquired this item. Is consistent with my goals. No, it's not. If you say no to these things, you cannot take it, right? A lot of times hoarders are perfectionists, again, ironically. But if you give them some rules, they oftentimes will follow them. So tell them, here are the things. If you can say, you know, I plan to use this tomorrow, then okay, you can take it. Take it home then. Right, but you have to answer these questions first. Okay, so sometimes that could work, and this is what I've been saying. It's exposure therapy. Over time, people get better and better at it, and that's why you need time to do this. Time is a big factor here. Anybody here working in health as a health home care coordinator? No? Okay, because I've been doing a lot of trainings with them, and you know their caseloads are fairly large, and oftentimes they may not have the time to do a lot of this work. But a lot of supportive housing case managers probably do over time. You know, it is intense, but you do a little bit at a time, you know. So there's a 6 and a 9 treatment rule. So here it is, worker may not touch any of their stuff without explicit permission, right? So that puts the onus on the tenant. They have the control, right? And that's really empowering, and they need to be able to feel in control. And they need to be able to make all decisions regarding saving, discarding, and organizing are made by the tenant. Any stuff that is touched has to be placed in a final location. So you need to create categories before you start excavating the person's room. Treatment should proceed systematically. And of course, you want to be flexible and creative because oftentimes people are going to probably resist throwing away things. And you can just kind of, again, roll with the punches as much as you can while trying to work on all these things. Now, again, this is what I was talking about. Here is the book. Now, Randy Frost is coming to CUCS in August. He's going to train our training department on this Buried in Treasures curriculum. There's some evidence that this works. And California, I think in LA, is starting to roll this out. Now, this is basically like a group modality, like illness management and recovery or wellness self-management. Same thing. You could probably do it one-on-one. But it is basically a self-help book created by Randy Frost, and also a hoarder that lives on Long Island, Lee Shower, has also done this and led groups on Long Island, and it works, right? So the tricky thing is trying to roll this out, right? But it is 15 classes long. Again, it's going to be cost-effective. Stop reducing the bed bugs and the hoarding and things like that. The book is $10. You know, you have a class of 10 people. You know, that's not a lot of money. thinking about, how much it costs on the other end. So this is going to be probably ready for us to train people on this curriculum around December, or maybe even earlier. But you can also buy the book and do it on your own if you want, right? So more about that. But this is where the field is going around to treat hoarding. The other thing is, again, a little bit more about genetics and medication. Probably the two together will be the next decade and the next frontier of working and managing compulsive hoarding. So a couple of tips. I'm getting out of time here. Finding help with compulsive hoarders right now is very difficult. That's why having these groups, hopefully in every borough, could be really helpful for New York City and for a lot of supportive housing providers. If you're interested in some of that, talk to me. I know OMH is interested, ACL, Shinny, and other agencies have been expressed some interest in this, and I think it might be really interesting to see how this works, and we will start training people very soon about it. Obviously, finding a therapist sometimes is helpful if you can. The best place for this and for all sort of information or anything about hoarding is the OCD Foundation. You can Google it, but it is right here. They have a hoarding center with a lot of the materials and videos and you name it. You can also plug in, your zip code, and they'll spit out, places that you can go for help. There's not a lot of places, though, unfortunately, right now. Hopefully that will change in the next 10 years. Sometimes when I do the 5-hour training, oftentimes staff, what do? They go home and they declutter right away. I'm not one of these people. Rose says sometimes, showing the videos, the A&E hoarding show, sometimes when tenants come and see it, oftentimes they go upstairs and they also declutter. So you can get the videos. I think they're $15. You don't want to single people out and say, hey, we got this hoarding show. You should come down. You are a hoarder, right? You don't want to do that. You want to say, hey, have you ever seen these shows? They're kind of fascinating. We're all watching it. Come on down. I've heard anecdotally that sometimes that does work. So what do we got? A couple of minutes. Again, there's information about the full day training and other packages that we do around other evidence-based practices. But why don't we just take a minute to talk. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes? I don't have a bibliography with me, but I have one at the office. So, I have cards in the back, so I'd be happy to send you one. Yeah. Right, those are the, the cutlery, that's a category, the clothing is a category, books are a category, all those kind of things. You want to help them create, they should be thinking about these categories on their own and try to come up with them before you start this, so that there's a final resting place for everything. Yeah.
As you mentioned, one of the problems is the time that, it takes for staff to
Right.
actually deal with hoarding issues. And so when it comes with property, like they have to, if it's gone to a point and they have to be evicted, dealing with those things, and let's say APS is in there, but they don't have hoarding sources and such. So how can you, it seems like it's more of training case managers or whatever in there to deal with these issues, but there's not, as you know, as you're familiar, it's a very lengthy process.
Right.
Getting addiction.
Right, a couple of things to say about that. One is people should be trained to deal with this disorder, just like, if you're in mental health and you don't understand schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or major depression or bipolar disorder, you will not be able to help people because you don't understand what's normal and what's not, and you get freaked out by it. But once you start to realize these are the symptoms, this is the disorder, then you can start to really help people. So training is really key. And then, of course, the good news about being in supportive housing is many of our tenants are living there for a very long, long time. So you have the time to start. It's really about starting now and making slow progress over time, because you don't want to just start dealing with this problem and say, oh, now we have 2 weeks or a month and the person's getting evicted. That's not enough time. You might be able to make some progress. Everybody's going to be different, right? Just like any kind of treatment, everybody's going to be different. There's lots of histories of trauma and a lot of people have had bad experiences with with treatment providers. So there's a lot of that to overcome. So start now and do a little bit at a time. Yeah.
So I work with the Free population.
Yep.
I'm wondering if there's research out there on, working with coming from 30 years of street homelessness, because what is not uncommon actually is for folks to bring in stuff from the street.
Right.
It doesn't seem to necessarily connect to like a memory or.
Right. I mean, some of that stuff that's when it's very difficult to figure out if it's hoarding or if it's just a survival mechanism, living off in the street, and you have all this stuff in order to survive. Now, like working with the chronically homeless, a lot of the behaviors will stick around for a few years until they start to get used to living in housing, and so it may be over time people start to get rid of things as they sort of get acclimated and to housing and to their community and things like that. But sometimes if those behaviors don't go away, it may be hoarding, I mean, it's not uncommon for a lot of homeless people to have hoarding issues, or, there's that classic thing in the Times a couple years ago where a woman was, had a cart and everything. And she actually owned an apartment, but she couldn't live there because it was just filled to the brim with stuff. And she had a failed business, and she was homeless because of it, Let me just see if I can get somebody else. Yeah, back here. Well, a lot of like the Diogenes syndrome is with the elderly, and there are some issues. There's a higher propensity with the elderly because of mobility issues and probably dementia and things like that. No doubt. Most of the studies are done with the elderly, so there needs to be a lot more research done with people with serious mental health issues and homelessness, things like that. But right now there's one article, like I said, I think it was from Australia, that Randy had to send me. Yeah. Right. What, the personality disorder? Not that I know of right now. Have you seen that? No, yeah. It's more the OCD, not the personality disorder OCD. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was some. There's a big connection between eating disorders and hoarding, and gambling and hoarding and things like that. You want to ask another one, all right?
In continuation to what I was
Yeah.
asking originally was, so do you think that addressing hoarding on, like, maybe just agency-wide would be effective with this population as opposed to just case by case?
I think in order to do this buried in treasure, the way I would think would be the best way to do it is if you have several buildings, you're going to you're going to put it in some neutral location where all of your tenants can kind of go to, where they don't feel like, they're going to be outed, or people are, because there's a lot of shame associated. Like, just quickly, I started an AA meeting at my building one year and did a lot of work on it. And, first day of AA, the guy who was the leader, he was the only one that came down. Then I realized, why isn't anybody else coming down? Well, because no one wants to know that they have alcohol problems or substance abuse problems. Same thing here. If you have a neutral location, where a lot of people can come to, that would probably work better than if you had it in just like one building. That'd probably be the best way to do it. Yeah. Right. That's the utility. They hold on for I mean, a lot of it is processing, like why, what do you like about it? And then is there any negative things of you keeping all these things, right? So it's sort of talking to them about that. And when you're proficient in MI, you start to help people, hit their goals and then see if there are things that are getting in the way. Now, for a lot of people, if they are like an electrician and they make their money off it or they sell it on eBay, then it gets harder to sort of rationalize getting rid of things because it does help them make money or things like that. If it doesn't, though, and so you're going to have to sort of illuminate the distress it causes or see some negative things and help them see that. And that could take, like anything, it could take a while, right? But that's where the answer is, though. It's kind of getting their personal goals, seeing how the hoarding gets or lends itself to maybe causing other problems or not helping them reach or gets in the way of attaining their goal, and then kind of working back and say, is there a reason? Sometimes you have to wait for that aha moment and go, aha, this is kind of the thing that's getting in the way. I mean, I don't know if that helps, but. Right. I mean, that's the disorder, It's like, I'm going to hold on to this because I need it for some reason. And the whole point is to say, well, you have 5 others. You don't need this 6th thing, So that's what's very difficult about it. And that's why it's. But you're saying people hold on to this because I intend to use it some point in time. Right. But a lot of hoarders actually never, ever do anything with it. Right. So, I mean, it's sort of making the connection between, yes, I know you were saying you intend to, but it's been 5 years since you've picked this thing out of the garbage and haven't used it. What do you think about that? Right. I mean, some people may say, well, I'm going to use it tomorrow. I don't know when I'm going to use it, but I'm going to hold on to it. So, I mean, that is part of the disorder, that kind of thinking, So it's trying to challenge that a little in a nice, empathetic way. Any other thoughts? Questions? Yeah.
How do you work with someone who hoards, but then instead of hoarding for themselves, they try and give you? In other words, what they do is their hoarding is, you buy it, they give, and you work with that causing a narcissistic injury.
What they hoard for other people?
In other words, part of their thing is they just deck for others. Like, here, I got you this.
Yeah. I mean, I have a guy at the office, another trainer. He's great, Rudy De La Haya. He loves eBay, and he loves vases and all things like that, statues and things like that. So he does is he buys things and he always gives something away. So he's not really a hoarder that way. And his apartment is beautiful and it's not full of clutter and everything. But obviously, if they're holding on for other people, it can get very complicated. People living with other people that have hoarding problems, or there's whole families of hoarders. And I remember this person on Long Island had their roommate. It was an apartment treatment program, and there were 2 of them living in a house. They were both hoarders, which one could think, oh, it's a match made in heaven, but also it could become a big problem, a fire hazard, and things like that. It can get very complicated. And of course, there's usually other problems, so it's not just hoarding. There's other medical problems and other issues. And, so, I don't have there's no easy answers to those things, but oftentimes it's working on multiple levels, like dealing with the mental health, also, and you hear this a lot, I hear this a lot in trainings, is that people are addicted, let's work on that only, and it's like, well, that's not the only thing you can do to give this person's life maybe a little bit more joy, a little bit more pleasure. Sometimes it's staying away from the problem and looking at other things and making those things better, like family relationships, medical issues, dental care. I don't know, all those other things that make the person feel better about themselves. And then you can kind of have a happier person, and then they may not need to do these other things so much, the addictions and the hoarding and things like that. So I often talk about that a lot. Get this microphone out of here. Yeah. Right. 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 That those things become very problematic, and that again, going back to that intention, good intentions. If it's happening and it's real, then it may be difficult to stop it because, someone is getting this stuff. But a lot of hoarders like to give things away as long as it has some use. So giving it away or donating it is often better than saying, I'm going to throw this away. Instead, say, what do you want to keep? What do we want to keep? And let's just, look to the future and say, what would your apartment be like if it was really much nicer? And how would that help you live a better life, right? So it gets very complicated. Obviously, in the full day training, we go into all these things even more. So you're interested, call me or call the Institute for other sort of ideas around evidence-based practices. But I think I'm over time. And now it's time for the cocktail hour. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope this was helpful. And I'll be here for a few minutes.